We're actually rolling at the time you want to start rolling.
Oh, fucking hell. Wonders will never cease. Good, that means I don't have to beat you up.
Why would you do that anyway?
Just to keep the theme of the podcast relevant.
You didn't have to kill me when we talked about death.
No, because you're gonna die because you're human. Everybody dies. You're not necessarily gonna be violated.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, we're not Catholic. You okay?
Okay. You didn't... I'm trying to think of no one. You didn't have to declare war on me when we talked about war.
You did, really.
Well, we kind of did, yeah. That might have been when the Ping PNG war started.
I didn't have to indoctrinate you when we started talking about religion.
Exactly. So don't beat me up, please. I did that enough.
Oh, hang on. I'm arguing the wrong side of the point now, aren't I? Shall we begin?
Okay, sure.
Are you sitting comfortably?
I don't know. Not particularly. Can I get a question? Joking. See, don't fall off your chair.
And desist.
Hello,
Who?
Don't laugh.
Who the fuck is that?
Don't laugh. Hello, Internet. No, I can't do it. Hello, Internet.
This is not very much in keeping with the atmosphere of the podcast.
We're funny. This is the funny podcast.
Right, this is what I've been trying to say. Let's.
Yeah, but you just go off on like weird philosophical tangents.
Yeah. All right. Well, just rein me in and.
We need to keep it at reality level, otherwise we're not going to get anywhere.
Violence is funny.
It is sometimes.
Itchy and Scratchy? Tom and Jerry?
No, I don't really find those that funny.
Road
and the
Runner?
metronome's on.
No, it doesn't matter.
I know, but it's still funny. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up.
Fucking hell. We did start on time.
Hello, Internet. I'm Firebolt.
And I'm the Orbiter.
Yay! Fuck you.
I was really tempted to open this episode by punching you in the face, but I felt like it might not go down too well with the police if they saw it, so...
What, YouTube?
No, that's true, yeah.
That's the more important one. But yeah, so if you didn't tell from that, today we are talking about violence.
Oh, whoop-de-doo. How jolly.
Okay, I'm going to start off with a very difficult question, because I know you love those.
Okay.
Is it okay to punch a Nazi?
Well, that's not fair.
I know it isn't.
Not, well, it depends on what they're doing. I mean, a Nazi holds specific philosophies, like, you know, personal beliefs about different people. But if they keep those beliefs to themselves and don't inflict them on other people...
They're like a public speaker on those beliefs. I'm not sure if they're Nazi. I know that they're definitely
I don't
white
know,
supremacist.
that's getting into hate speech, isn't it?
Yeah. But those sorts of people, is it okay to punch them? Because I think there was a
depends what you mean by
a while
okay.
ago, because...
I mean, every action has consequences.
I want to clarify, sorry. These documents are very classified. That Antifa is not an organisation, it is a philosophy. So when I say member of Antifa, I just mean someone that follows an Antifa philosophy. If you don't know what Antifa is, it's anti-fascism.
Okay, what's the difference then between saying, is it okay to punch a Nazi, and saying, is it okay to bomb the fuck out of a Nazi-occupied country?
Well, bombing the fuck out of a Nazi-occupied country, first of all, kills people, and second of all, kills non-Nazis. People
Which is
that had nothing to
presumably
do with
what we did in the war.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we're moral.
No. I personally don't.
We didn't do that.
I personally don't agree with physical violence at all. So I would say no.
What about self-defense?
Yes. Self-defense, yes.
And what if punching that Nazi means that later down the line, the influence those words have means that a Jewish person doesn't get the shit beaten out of them, bleed to death?
You're getting into Minority Report territory there. I don't know if you've seen Minority Report.
I've not.
It's about... I mean, actually, that's one step removed from that, because it's the concept is... The Minority Report's about a technology which allows the powers that be to detect the seeds, the mental seeds of criminal behaviour before a crime is committed. Is it okay to prevent? I mean, do you know what I mean? If it's like the thing, like if you could go back and kill Hitler when he was a child, would that be justified?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think it is important to note in this that violent words can have as much of an impact, if not more of an impact, than physical violence.
Yeah, definitely. You cunt.
So again, so there is this, like I mentioned, this philosophy called Antifa, which is against fascism by any means necessary. I think that's how they put it.
Yeah.
So that can mean burning fascist things. That can mean
I think it
punching
was.
fascists.
I can't remember.
It can mean more non-violent techniques of slow campaigning and fact-checking.
I can't remember. Was it that 90s program I was watching, which was saying about Martin Luther King's having said, I'm paraphrasing here because I can't remember the exact wording, but basically I think it was about rioting, but that's a form of violence, isn't it? Rioting is the voice of the unheard.
I don't know.
So, because I mean, they were talking about the racial riots in the 90s in LA, and I think to a certain extent in New York as well. And while society frowns on violent protest, is that justified if you're not being listened to when you voice your concerns in a so-called reasonable way?
Non-violent method.
Yeah.
Okay, I know that at some point we're going to be covering terrorism, but I would like to discuss this because I feel like it's relevant. For an essay I did at school, a subject I looked at was, can terrorism be justified? And the anti-apartheid movement.
Anti-poo fight?
Shut up. I can't speak.
Yeah, I'm not for poo fighting, no.
It's okay, the dark guy in the news couldn't speak earlier. It was quite funny.
What did he say?
He was talking about something about Donald Tusk, but talks with Donald Tusk, but it was Tusk with talks.
He probably had
he
definitely had a lot more audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would hope
anti-apartheid movement.
And also the suffragette movement came up with that because violent methods were used in both those movements. And now, for the most part, that situation has been resolved.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah.
So there's an argument to be made that more change can be made with violence in extreme situations where, I mean, this comes back to, I think, discussion we had with War about revolution.
Yeah, I think it's okay as a last resort.
Yeah. It should be the last option you use. Really.
Yeah. But then it really depends as well on, I mean, I say viewpoint, but it's kind of, there's always going to be opposing points of view, isn't there? And, you know, going back to the Nazis, what they did to the Jews was violent, but it adhered to their own philosophies.
That doesn't make it okay.
No, but who judges which philosophies are okay and which aren't? Or is it merely the victor who decides?
Practically, yes, but I guess common human decency would dictate that. You would hope it would, but there's been many situations where it hasn't.
But is common human decency not what's the prevailing agreed philosophy about what decency is, which is a result of the way society has progressed and who's won and who's lost different rights fights, if you like.
Yeah, but the point is that we can still look back at that and go, that was wrong. Those people, many of them would still be alive today if they had actually used common sense and empathy to deal with that situation.
Yeah.
And fought against this tyrannical authority.
But there are those who don't see empathy and anti-tyranny, if you like, as positive traits. There are those who see tyranny and oppression as better for the human race.
Well, then they clearly benefit from it. Those are the sorts of people that will benefit from it. You never, I mean, I think there are very few black supremacists. I think there was a thing with Louis Theroux where some of them thought Beethoven was black for some reason. But the point is, with that sort of mindset, is that they want the sort of oppression that will benefit them. They want them to rise up. They want to be taken above everyone else. They don't want equality.
Yeah.
It's not about them thinking, oh, this is just the way society should work, where only the best people survive. That's not what it's about. And that's an abhorrent ideology in the first place.
But it is the way evolution works.
No, it's not.
Survival of the fittest.
No.
Fucking hell, that was condescending.
Well, it's about...
It might not be comfortable, but...
No, it's not. It's not about that. That's not what... Social Darwinism is a perversion of that. Survival of the fittest is about survival of your genetics. If you, say in a family, and this is actually the biological reason for homosexuality, in a family, if your brothers and sisters have kids, like...
But I'm not talking about social strength. I'm talking about physical strength.
But as a species, one human's not very strong. In the past, if you were on your own, you were quite weak. You had to fit in with everyone else to survive, and that's how we've prevailed as a society. That's how civilization has formed, just as a sort of build-up of that big unit, and that's now why we have countries that people feel identity to. That's how that works. It's about survival of the unit, and that's why people feel very attacked when someone attacks their unit. If they see the units the same way most of the world does.
So what if you don't respect the unit that you're a part of?
well, then you get isolated from it. Well, either that or you lie to everyone you ever know, which is what a lot of the big CEOs of banks do because they're actually psychopaths.
Or enough like-minded people who feel the same way rise up with you.
It's not usually that. It's usually that you trick people into it. Fascists pretend to be something that they're not.
I'm not talking about fascists.
Well, that is fascism. What you're describing.
Yeah, but
is
what if the
fascism.
fascists are in charge and you're not? You don't respect that.
Well, then you fucking revolt.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's the point where you have to ask: will you kill more people that are not the problem? Then, because you take a huge gamble with that. Because if you provoke that government, then they could, if they're very powerful, bomb your entire city.
I suppose that's where there's a difference.
Minor provocation has caused massive consequences.
I suppose that's where there's a
You have to weigh it up.
I suppose that's where there's a difference between organised violence, which might be the way that people traditionally see terrorism, and violent protest, as in rioting, because rioting is more out of control. It's not targeted.
Usually in those situations,
It's just where it's boiled over.
yeah, there's some sort of provocation. Either someone that's meant to be controlling that situation abuses their power, or some shit stirrers go in and stir shit up. They have different goals to each other, and because that's a sort of disparate group of people that have been banded around one cause, you can't guarantee that they want the same thing out of it.
No, but they might have a cause in common.
Yeah, but that's like saying, I think most people would see Nazis as a sort of enemy, even if they don't want to take violent action against them. But some people see it fit to take violent action against them, and some people see different ways of tackling that issue.
Mm-hmm.
But then there is also an important thing about, because it's usually that people are indoctrinated into these sort of belief systems by people pretending to be who they're not, and pretending that, oh, we'll have a glorious new land and you'll get lots of nice shiny stuff and whatever.
I don't understand the benefit to. I mean, I just don't get it. I get the way people can be indoctrinated and brainwashed, but the people who do that with open eyes from the top, if you like, of an organisation or a cult or whatever, I don't get what's in it for them other than power, which I don't get why that's important. I don't get why that makes their life any better.
Well,
is it adrenaline or?
it might be part of that, but also just having loads of people at your beck and call.
Power.
Some people don't value love that much, or friendship, or people, because some people are psychopaths, but some people just see it as, well, if I can just make my life better, then why shouldn't I do that? That's my right. I'm just protecting my interests. So some people don't see it as necessary to protect the unit.
Right.
It's a difficult question. Certainly. Do you think it's justified for a rape victim to defend themselves with potentially lethal violence?
That's a difficult one because, well, my initial reaction would have been I wouldn't see it as violence, even if it's potentially lethal. But then at the same time, I was thinking about this earlier. Rape doesn't necessarily have to be a physically violent act. Well, it depends. You see, we're coming down to definition again. What does violent mean? Does it mean physically Violent to me means just violating someone. Like you said, it can be a mental thing. It's violating someone's rights, I suppose, in any way. It's not necessarily a physical act. A rape victim might not even struggle. So therefore, there may not be any physical violence involved other than the act of penetration itself.
I have heard it said that sometimes the reason for that is because they know that they'll get a better settlement out of court if they don't fight back.
Better settlement out of court.
They'll get more money in reparations.
I've not heard that, but I have heard and completely understand the concept that they, in the heat of the moment, would feel that they're likely to be less physically injured if they don't struggle. It's a survival instinct, I would think. But yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because again, it's another thing that would be in the heat of the moment. Is it likely to result in making the attempt to inflict injury on your attacker? Is it likely to result in, you're more likely to get killed yourself in the attempt? Is fighting back going to make things worse for you? It's. I've been in a potentially violent situation, probably more than once, but where sometimes running away or sometimes taking what other people might think of as the coward's way out is actually the most sensible thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. If there's, I would imagine with your history with drugs, there's been some situations where you've been not so friendly with some people that could hurt you if they wanted to.
Yeah, I remember driving a guy around in my taxi who I knew to be a drug dealer and had bought off in the past, and never had any problems with the guy. Never felt threatened by him. Heard a lot about his reputation, but he gets a really fucking big knife out and starts brandishing it and sort of saying, "Look at this," and like basically showing off at how amazing this new knife is that he's got. I don't know what kind of knife it was because I know very little about that. And while that to anyone could be a threatening act, and I did feel intimidated, it was natural to me to just kind of go along with it and say, oh yeah, just because that with somebody with a reputation like that, if you start having a go about it or calling them a psycho, or you're likely to put yourself in a dangerous situation. And I suppose that's how a lot of people end up in situations that they perhaps didn't intend to, simply because they're going along with something out of fear. So I suppose that would come into the category of the mental violence part there, because he'd never laid a finger on me, but he didn't have to, because he could probably tell that I was intimidated without him having to.
Being made there.
Yeah. He did actually try to get me to deal for him. He was he used to distribute to other dealers and that, and I did in a non-threatening way. I did refuse. I did say, "Oh no." I just said, "I don't want to get into dealing. It's, that's a level up for me. It's not. I'm not interested in that. But thanks for the offer, kind of thing. Well, you're going to be fucking polite to somebody who could kill you.
It just sounds like sort of, I politely decline your business proposition here, but thanks anyway.
Yeah. Actually, I remember once I was a messed up individual at the time. But I remember once he sold me, I think, 10 LSD tabs, and I had taken one or one and a half or something one night. Totally in the wrong environment. It's not the sort of thing you ever want to do on your own, which I did, because it has strong mental effects, and you kind of need to be in a safe environment with people you can trust. And I just had the worst trip. I thought I was going insane. I thought I'd returned to kind of early infancy, and that I was trapped there, and I would never be sane again, because I just thought my brain was mentally broken, basically, and it scared the shit out of me. I had a really bad trip, and it scared the shit out of me. So anyway, I had the rest of these left, and he'd given me them. I think it had been to, I can't remember whether it had been to try and sell him on. That was when he was trying to get me to deal for him. And I thought, well, that was it. I was going to give him 50 quid for him. But anyway, I didn't have the money anyway. And I took them back to him, gave him the 10 quid for the one that I'd actually taken, and took them back and said, and explained that I'd had a really bad trip and I just didn't ever want it again and all this. And he just laughed. He was like, but afterwards I'm like, Jesus, I mean, I got myself into some seriously dodgy situations, The guy had spent some time in prison.
It was not surprising.
Yeah. It's not something I'm... I've been in a few situations that have either been potentially violent or there has been actual violence. I mean, my parents split up because of domestic violence, and that has all sorts of effects you don't even necessarily know about for the rest of your life when you grow up with that.
Yeah,
but that was back in the 70s when depression wasn't even really diagnosed properly, but yeah, I'm just trying to think I've seen fights break out, and they're kind of weird to see happen, like outside pubs and stuff. I actually saw somebody put their head through a plate glass window once, voluntarily. They were on coke at the time. But they got kicked out of a club. This was in Spain. They got kicked out of a club because they were high as a kite, and they just kicked off outside the club with the bouncers around, and just put their head through the front window of the club, just like headbutted it, and probably felt nothing because they were so high as a kite, but they feel it the next day.
Yeah, possibly for the rest of their life if they got any brain damage.
But yeah, violence is...
There's something to be said with that about violence towards oneself.
Yeah.
Because I think at some point we're all guilty of beating ourselves up mentally, but then there's a next level to that. Would you say that drug abuse would be part of that?
Abuse, yeah.
And would you say that at any point for you, was it something that you wanted to do to hurt yourself?
I don't think you kind of analyse it that...
not when you're high as a kite.
Much. It's escapism at the time.
Yeah.
Because you can't deal with normal life. But I wouldn't call it violence. I would call that kind of faulty self-medication, because it is a form of not being able to cope with normal life is something that's a lot better dealt with. I think it could still improve a lot, but it's a lot better dealt with by GPs and the like nowadays.
Yeah.
And I think, along with alcohol abuse, I would say that there is a safe level of recreational usage. But when you're talking about abuse, and it is a grey area, but it's just when you've crossed into territory where you kind of, I don't know. I suppose you find yourself in that place by accident. And I suppose with any substance, that's going to be the case, whether it's legal or illegal. Because you never, I don't think most of the time, I don't remember first taking any illegal drugs because I couldn't cope with life at the time. And I don't remember a specific time at which I thought, yeah, this has gone too far. But then, there isn't a line, is there, that you cross? It just happens gradually.
Yeah, I guess that's the difficulty.
I would imagine it's a similar kind of situation with domestic violence, because from what I can tell, the psychological part of it, the mental abuse, is something that can slowly build up over time.
So it's sort of a frog in a pot of boiling water. It's slowly being turned up.
Yeah, exactly.
Before you realise that you're in a terrible situation, you've just gotten used to that idea, and that you've gradually sort of lowered your self-esteem from allowing that to happen to you, that you no longer see it as them being a bad person.
No, and by the time you get to that point as well, I've been in this situation with the long-term relationship I had before I met Mum, actually. Almost 5 years that lasted. And you do reach the point where you begin to blame yourself.
Was that just psychological abuse?
Part of the problem. I think in the main, yeah. But it did come to a head when I did actually call the police, because I was unable to. I was trying to see at the time. I had been gradually broken down over 2 or 3 years. I'd been kind of on various drugs at the time as well, so it was, I wasn't personally as a strong person at the time, so I was probably fairly easy to break down, but
mentally and physically.
But the frustration of that happening meant that I personally I could feel at times that I could personally be at risk of lashing out, whether against myself or the other person. And when you find yourself emotionally breaking down like that, because you'll do anything, if you're a decent person, which I hope that I am, when you find yourself breaking down like that and reaching a point where you can feel that you're a danger either to yourself or to the person near you, you'll do anything to turn it inwards rather than hurt the other person.
Yeah.
And I think it came to a head when I called the police. I threatened to call the police in the hope that it would actually. I was trying to get out of the flat that we lived in, because we were having this big argument about something, and she was just shouting and stuff, and she just blocked the doorway so I couldn't get out, basically. And I knew that the only way for me to deal with the situation in the moment was to just get out and cool down, go for a walk, just to calm down, and then come back to it. That was the best thing to do, just to have a time out, you know what I mean? And she just wouldn't let that happen, so I just threatened to call the police. And she just, laughed in my face as if to say, yeah, go on then, you think you're so, you think it's that serious, see what they'll say. You know, they'll say you're wasting your time, sort of thing. Made me feel as though I was making a big thing out of something that they wouldn't be interested in. So I did. At which point she immediately let me out. I went off for a walk, and then 5 minutes later, I had a phone call from a panicking because the police had turned up at the door. It was like, this was very shortly before the relationship ended.
Right.
And do you know what? That was the biggest. It was a weird situation because I knew. In fact, I think that was the day that I knew it was over. And I waited till she went to work the next day. And then I came back because I was driving taxis at the time. I came back to the flat, packed the stuff that I needed, and left. Basically, and I went. I basically lived in a bed and breakfast for a couple of weeks, which was opposite the taxi office, and that was where it was a place where I think social services used to house kids that were on their way into care. But I just had this bed in this. This was before I got the flat that Mum came to visit me in, which I had for about 6 months. But anyway, during that time. I remember going and sitting in the car, in the taxi, on an industrial estate near the place that I lived, and just it's interesting actually that I was going to use the word violently, cried my eyes out. And that's the lowest I have ever felt in my entire life. I vividly remember looking out of the car window and thinking, it doesn't get any worse than this. And it was. I remember the day. It was kind of late afternoon. It was a really dull day, and there were kind of really dark, thick grey clouds in the sky, and I just felt like it was. But at the same time, because I felt like that, and because I knew that was the lowest I'd ever been, at the same time I knew that it was up from there. That was it. It wasn't going to get any worse.
You were like,
yeah,
it's not going to.
And almost in that moment, crying my eyes out in that moment was almost like an emotional release. It was relief, you know. It was like,
that's what crying does generally.
Yeah.
I think I'm always scared because even though I've gotten it mostly under control with my autism, I still relatively regularly have violent urges, and I sometimes act on them. Not usually in a massively dramatic way, but I'm always scared that I'm going to create that sort of atmosphere of fear for someone else, because it's just a terrible thing, and I felt quite guilty about things that I've done when I was younger.
We all have.
Yeah.
There is no human being alive that hasn't. Or if they don't, then they're probably the fascist dictators and stuff.
Yeah, psychopaths.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's scary that, because I sometimes feel hypocritical as well with that, criticizing violent people, because I do have those impulses, and I have sometimes acted on them relatively recently. But the way that I look at it is, usually in those situations, there's been an extreme provocation towards me, where either I've been bullied for months or I've been backed into a corner, and that was my only option.
There's a complex set of dynamics at play as well, because sometimes, and women are probably in general better at this than men, which is an interesting thing. Sometimes you need to. It's good to let emotions out straight away, and sometimes it's wiser to keep them in. But the trouble is, if you keep them in, they can actually then become twisted. You know, like suppressing emotions can change that into. This is one of the reasons why I find being a musician quite helpful and therapeutic, because although I try to think about very carefully about words and actions most of the time, it's not always that easy, especially when you're tired, but you don't want that to turn into suppressed emotions which can become poisonous and self-destructive or even destructive of other people. You need some way of channeling that internal struggle so that you can get it out, you know. And a lot of people use sport for that. You know?
Yeah, I remember because I was really shit at physical, just sports in general at school when I actually did PE, which made me quite pissed off because I felt like shit about it because some assholes were dicks about it. So
competitive bullshit.
Yeah. So I sort of tried to channel my anger into actually an adrenaline boost to make me run faster or swing harder, whatever I needed to do.
But unless you're good at it, you just end up making yourself look like a twat, don't you? It's like, no offense to you, but because I'm the same. It's like you just turn into a struggling idiot, basically, in their eyes. But
I found that I've surprised quite a lot of people, because if you look at like how I look, I mean, but our dear listeners can't see the fact that I'm practically skeletal.
Think a teenaged Ichabod Crane.
I'm very lanky. So I think I've surprised quite a lot of people when I have fought back, because I don't know, I think I just get an adrenaline surge quite easily because I'm quite used to channeling that, I guess.
Out of interest, you've I don't know, the listeners probably won't know this, but you've recently, because you've been taking percussion lessons for quite a while, and you recently joined a couple of music groups playing percussion, which you rehearse with every week for a couple of hours at a time. Have you found any therapeutic benefits like that coincide with? Have you felt any better since you started doing that, with frustrations and general kind of stressful situations?
I think so, but not for the reasons of like taking out my anger on the drum that you'd sort of expect. I think it's just a sort of general sort of feeling of being useful, part of something bigger that I quite like. With it being a sort of, it's not technically an orchestra, it's concert bands, but
you know that feeling when the whole group's playing and you're a part of it, and you're like you say, you're not physically taking it out on the drums, but you're in a controlled way, you're channeling emotional output basically to become part of a bigger kind of thing that's bigger than you are. You know, it's like, to me, it's, even though it's not violent, it's controlled.
It's
intense, and I think it gives you more practice at self-control.
Where I think I perform best, particularly under pressure, is when I'm able to channel that adrenaline of sort of frustration with myself not being able to do something into a sort of heightened focus.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
where musically I'll be like exact on every beat if I can, so that I'm paying attention to each hit of whatever I'm playing.
But there's lots of different criteria for each hit as well. That it's not just about the placement; it's about putting some emotion into it, as with volume and tone and everything that goes with it. It's a really intense level of concentration, isn't it? I saw you at that first concert that I came to, and I thought, Jesus, he's like, he's on the case here, playing the temps.
Yeah, I've seen other temp players though. I'm like, Jesus should definitely be here. But usually they're standing up, so that's a bit easier.
Yeah. So I mean, this is one of the reasons that a lot of the campaigns have been going on for sort of music in schools and stuff like that. There's, regardless of whether you're gonna,
a great output for that sort of thing, because it's a very personal expression of that, and
it's as important, I think, as any other subject, because it's not just for the people who are gonna, go into that as a career. It's actually personally enriching for anyone.
It's very good for mental health, I think. Anyway, we've kind of strayed from violence, I think.
A wise move.
Okay, we will probably talk about this a bit, not next week, but the next episode, because then we are talking about gender, but there's loads of other stuff in that as well, so we'll have plenty to talk about then. So I do want to talk about a specific gap between men and women and how violent they are, at least physically. I am aware women are more women are more likely to turn to verbal methods of violence, I think, which are, I guess, harder to see. So it's difficult to do statistics on that.
They can be more subtle as well.
But generally, men statistically are more violent, but also I think we have a warped perception of how much when it's flipped on its head, how much it affects the man, because they're meant to be seen as tough and strong and emotionless.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that annoys me, and I totally accept the statistics that.
But I don't like the assertion that it's a completely one-sided issue.
No, well,
both sides
this
of that need
this
to
is
work
related to
together.
that. Is that if there's ever a discussion on, I'll say if there's ever, but 99% of the time there's ever a discussion on TV or on the radio or in print about it, it's talking about domestic violence against women. And while I completely accept that it's statistically that is more the direction, why talk about it in those terms? Why not just say violence against anyone? Why specify?
I guess
that?
Because there's a much higher rate with men, so we need to assess how we.
Is it not reinforcing stereotypes by addressing it in those terms instead of just talking about humans against other humans? When you're continually bombarded with the male on female violence idea, it becomes embedded in your consciousness that that's the way it happens.
I think there was a study done.
It's not acceptable
where they had
at all.
I think they're in like a shopping centre or something.
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier. Yeah,
where they did one version where a man was being violent towards women, initially verbally, and then that was meant to escalate to something physical if people didn't intervene. Loads of people intervened because I don't know. I think there's a much greater perceived threat there.
Yeah,
because people naturally just see a man as being more powerful, I think, so they see it as a lot more dangerous to the women. But when they did that with a woman, and when she escalated to physical violence, only a couple of people, I think, stepped in.
But it's an interesting point, that, because while physically that may be the case, that a man may be physically stronger build. Isn't it also reinforcing to the woman that she is the weaker of those two people?
Yeah, it's difficult to strike a balance with that because you can be very easily patronising to both sides.
Yeah. I would just say, you just totally acknowledge the statistics, but at the same time,
talk about it with respect to that they are people, these statistics, and it can go either way. You just need to sort of have a general shift towards a better way with dealing with those situations for everyone.
Yeah. To only talk about something in those terms is, to me, is sexist.
Yeah. I would say so. It's...
And that's not because I think that it's being misrepresented. It's just that it's irrelevant. Well, not totally irrelevant. Men do have to... I mean, one of the things, actually, talking about that, one of the things that men have to grow up to realise and to deal with is that their voices are more intimidating in general. I know for a fact that I would be more often accused of, I would come across as more aggressive.
Yeah.
By raising my voice than most women would. But it's simply because of the pitch and the tone of my voice. And that's kind of, because of that, you tend to develop strategies to vocalize more gently by comparison. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So, I mean, maybe the fact that men are generally physically more powerful, and I say generally because, we're talking about an average here. There are plenty of damn strong women around, and there are plenty of really weak men as well. But,
case in point.
Maybe the more powerful you are and the stronger you are, the more gentle you have to focus on being. The more you have to kind of...
It's like when you see those boxers that, like, they're fucking scary.
And they open their mouths.
Yeah. Just sort of the way they carry themselves, you're just like, shit. But they're some of the nicest and gentlest people.
Yeah.
Often.
Yeah. But I suppose it's when that doesn't carry through,
Yeah.
I don't like this when people tell people to man up. Don't like that.
But anyway, I think we can talk about that sort of perception.
Yeah, we're getting into a different area there, aren't we? I did... I was in two minds about bringing this up because it's a whole kettle of worms, fish, can of crisps. I don't know what you're talking about. Chocolate teapot. I don't know what I'm talking about. But it is kind of news related. It may be something that needs to go in the Bollocks report, but it is specifically about a particularly horrific, violent thing that's been in the news.
Is
lately.
that to do with the Catholic Church?
No, it's to do with the teenager who raped and murdered the 6-year-old girl in Glasgow.
Right.
And it was particularly violent. The details have been released. The guy's been named now as well. I think I'm not sure how old he was when it happened. If he was, but I think he's 17 now, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, he's in that kind of mid to late teens area.
Right.
And he basically abducted this 6-year-old, went into the house of someone he used to buy drugs from. that the father was a drug dealer. But he went in and took the 6-year-old girl from their room, basically took her off and violently raped her, and apparently the girl had 117 injuries. This is really difficult to kind of talk about, but she was conscious when the main part of the attack was happening, and she was basically strangled and smothered to death by considerable pressure from the attacker. So that's about as violent as you can get.
Right.
And obviously brings up some very emotional responses. Now, I think in that kind of... I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that somebody who can do that is severely mentally... There's something wrong big time there, you know.
Yeah.
There is a theory that anyone is capable of anything given the right circumstances, or the wrong circumstances, perhaps. But you got to wonder, you know. I mean, anyone who's been through teenage years and grown up to adulthood is going to have things that they look back on and think, I regret doing that, or I did some, you know, that was a mistake, or that was something daft that I did. But to do something that drastic, it's a bit like in the same vein as the Bulger twins. Were they twins? Do you remember?
No, it's just one.
Just one.
James Bulger.
James Bulger, yeah. Did he put a baby on a railway line or something?
Yeah, he was about 2 years old. And they lured him from a shopping centre down to the railway line and threw stones at him, and then I think the train then came, but I don't know. I know there was a railway line and lots of stone throwing.
Yeah.
He was killed that way.
Now, obviously, in both of those cases, the focus of a lot of the media, and quite rightly, is on the victim and the families and the sufferers and that. And I totally agree that, you know, something like that has to be taken through the justice system. But I just wonder what can have happened, especially if you're talking about somebody who's a minor at the time of an offence like that, at the time of committing an offence like that. What can possibly have happened to them to make them do something that horrific? You know,
I know at the time there was lots of things about them playing violent video games, and that's when the kind of campaign against violent video games was kind of really sort of
something that I was going to bring up was about the violence in film and video games and stuff like that. There are so many people that can play and watch that sort of thing and actually potentially get some therapeutic benefit from it, because it's a release of feelings that they might otherwise suppress, and it's an understanding, it's a confrontation of that side of human nature, because we do have a violent side inside us.
Just ignoring that's not going to be helpful.
No,
but there are, I mean,
but what turns
it's impossible to know with that sort of thing, because you would have to be a very fucked up individual to get inspiration from that.
Yeah, but I suppose this is where you're getting into the realms of sort of deep sort of psychological analysis.
So I don't think any specific action needs to be taken against violent media.
No,
but it's
there was something that happened at the time. Actually, something was censored at the time. I'm trying to think back to what it was.
Manhunt.
With the Jamie Bulger thing, there was something it was last year I was watching something, and it had been tempered. No, that was it. It was one of the Child's Play films, the Chucky things. I think it was Child's Play 3. Not sure, but it was actually banned in the UK temporarily because it was all around the same time, and there was a scene in it that could have been seen to...
I know there's a Rockstar game called Manhunt that's banned in the UK. and that's because it featured a method of killing that was suffocating someone with a plastic bag. Which,
you see, I've seen that happen in films.
I don't know, maybe some people think it's more of an issue because it's more interactable.
Is it? I mean, are you playing the character that does the suffocating in the game?
I think so.
Yeah. I suppose there's a danger there that if you're going to get I mean,
I don't know, it's quite an old game and there's not a whole lot of footage available of it, I don't think.
At the risk of having puritanical people point their fingers and call me a psychopath, if killing people and chopping heads off and suffocating people with plastic bags didn't bring about some kind of thrill or adrenaline release, shall we say more accurately, then they wouldn't be a part of games. You know, I completely admit that wandering around shooting things in the head on a computer screen is good fun. You know, it's like quite a thrill, especially when you're getting better at it. But that's because I know it's a game.
Oh, you see, that's my problem. I've never got better at it. I don't like it. I just run into walls and shoot myself in the foot.
But then, what does it take for you to step beyond that and actually? Because I mean, the number of
I've only seen
TV things that
I've seen very few games that promote completely unprovoked violence. Otherwise, it's completely up to the player to be as psychotic as they want to be in some things.
But there is, the number of things I've seen, I don't know if it's reality or not, but it would actually make sense, where people in these sort of gangster-based films or TV series or whatever, once they've made the first kill, it changes you as a person. In reality, if you actually kill someone, it changes you as a person, or so people who have killed say.
Yeah.
And I can imagine. I mean, I can't imagine killing someone, but I can imagine that it would have a serious effect on me. And I suppose that's the difference. If you're a psychopath, it wouldn't have that much of an effect on you, would it?
Yeah, that's generally.
So is it that effect that they're chasing? Do they want to feel something? And that's the most intense way they can think of to actually feel an emotion?
It's hard for me to really say because I'm not a psychologist and I've never felt that extreme about anyone. So I can't really tell you.
And I suppose it's a very different situation if you're faced with, for instance, Hitler or
because I'm not sure how many people he killed directly in his more famous. I mean, I know that he was a soldier during World War One, so he probably did at least kill someone then. I don't know.
Someone who has raped and murdered somebody you love. If you're in a room with somebody who's done that to somebody you love and you've got a gun, I mean, very often the families of the victims in those cases say that they forgive them for what they've done because
it's about
the only
reconciliation at that point.
Yeah,
they don't.
It's not going to make them feel any better.
Yeah.
In fact, it's probably going to make them feel worse because it's like that 2 wrongs don't make a right sort of thing. But it's like it's just horrendous situation.
In places where they do have the death penalty, it's been shown that it does actually quite a lot of mental damage to the witnesses of the execution, which are often the victim's family.
Yeah.
Where they have to go to counselling after it because they can't deal with the fact that this person was killed for something so horrific, but that.
I mean,
it doesn't solve anything.
See, I was thinking about that. The difference between humans tearing each other apart and a lion doing it for food, and then thinking back to when. In the evolution of our species, the kind of turning point was when we began to hunt, and we kind of discovered fire and started cooking meat and all that sort of stuff. But it's like, what that first, there must have been a first kill, if you like. There must have been a prehistoric ancestor of ours who first killed another animal and ate it.
Well, that depends where you draw the line between where our species starts and another species along the line.
Yeah.
Goes.
But that point at which,
even if
what
they didn't
drove
use a tool for it,
I suppose at that point it was a survival instinct, wasn't it?
Like, they would always have to eat, and they wouldn't be killing each other to eat usually.
Yeah.
So unless they're foraging, but they still have to fend for themselves. So it would still be that sometimes they'd have to.
That brings up something else. Do you think cannibalism is violence?
Well, that's. I mean, it could be psychological violence to someone who is connected to the person that's being eaten, but unless you've killed the person that's being eaten, then no. If it's just sort of eating dead people to survive that were already dead and you did nothing to.
But there was a thing a few years ago. There was a guy that used to advertise for people to come to dinner, if you like, and it was both parties knew that the
goal of eating was to be eaten.
To eat them. Yeah, to be eaten. I'm going to come to your house for you to eat me. Like,
there's quite a funny moment in the IT crowd about that.
Is that?
Moss answered an advertisement about cooking lessons. And he was going like, "Oh no, I don't want to give you." It was a German guy for some reason. I'm not going to give you the accent. I don't want to give you cooking lessons. I just wanted to eat you, because it just like asked him to take off his clothes.
I see. It just makes me think of the restaurant at the end of the universe, Max Quordlepleen.
Yeah. Okay.
That was violent.
It was.
And not silent. Maybe we should end on that note.
Maybe we shouldn't. I don't know.
Did you have anything further of pertinence to say?
Well, we've talked about a lot of forms of violence. When do you think it's okay?
Well, self-defense.
When I say so.
Well, you're not always there, and you would have a lot of cases to look through.
Well, it's only okay when I say so, so. Not very often.
Okay.
I would say that about covers it, because that, in its widest sense, is it covers a lot of...
What about defense of others?
It's more grey area, isn't it? And are we going to go on to the... is it Hobson's choice? Is that what it's called?
I don't know.
What's the thing with the railway tracks?
It's generally just called the trolley problem.
Yeah. It's like... What's...
I mean, you might consider the pushing the switch to be the violent action, but it's doing nothing more violent. Are bystanders just as responsible for the violence?
The trouble is, the more abstract the concept becomes, the less you can be certain that the consequences are positive or negative. I mean, it's like defending others. You know, if Hitler was being attacked as a child by somebody else and was likely to be killed, would you defend him? Is the same question, essentially, I suppose, as would you kill him in the first place?
Chaos theory and all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
With how, well, if I did intervene, you know...
I mean, we didn't do nearly enough with the situation in Rwanda, did we?
Which situation?
There was genocide, basically, and we kind of nobody really intervened. What was that? The Hutus? Is that the Hutus in Rwanda? What they were called?
Hutus and Tutsis, I think, something like that.
Yeah. There's a really good film, Hotel Rwanda, we should watch sometime.
It's the same in
about it.
Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
Very little intervention.
Yeah. People just staying out of it because it's like... And I notice countries will tend to get involved a lot more often when there's oil involved.
Mm-hmm.
Wonder why.
Um,
Reality just turns out we're just as power hungry as everyone else. It's just we've sort of got our international structures that we want to abide by to keep that power, to keep us in check, because some people do care, fortunately. But there's power-grabbing psychopaths in our government, I'd be willing to bet.
Yeah.
It's just impossible to know who. Yeah, to do with bystanders, recently, I think it's because when we're doing our subject choices, because recently we got like subject choice forms for our next year at school, one of the options on wider achievement, which is a thing that you get less periods of a week, but it's like an extra qualification that you can get. One of the things for that was, I think it's called Mentors for Violence Protection.
Right.
That would be training up, I think it's 24 pupils to teach the younger years how to deal with situations where violence arises.
Yeah, bullying in schools definitely needs more. Because, I mean,
There's a problem as well, because a lot of people with that peer pressure don't feel like they have the confidence to stand up to those people.
See, I mean, that extends outside of school, obviously. A lot of bullying now takes place online, and I'm horrified by the amount of bile that you can be exposed to online. You have to choose to ignore it. You have to choose to walk away from it, but
I'm lucky enough to say that I don't think I've been
more
ever
susceptible
on
to
the
that.
brunt of that sort of thing. I've had dickheads online before, but we all do.
Yeah,
But that's partially, I think, just because I don't really interact that much with that sort of thing, because I think I've quit quite a lot of the social media platforms just to avoid that bile.
Yeah.
The only one that I'm on is Twitter, because I only know a few of the people that I follow.
I've got to the point now where I get... Because, I mean, a lot of it on Facebook is people sharing memes, which I find offensive. And I've got to the point where I just hide the post and then just unfollow the person 9 times out of 10 and just leave it at that, because I think people get drawn into arguments about stuff too easily, and that's when it can get...
But there is a question to be asked, mentally, whether if you stepped in and challenged that and said, well, this is why this is fucked up and that's why you're wrong about this, could that save them from having a small part in the influence of a greater oppression of someone?
Potentially, yeah, but then you've got, I suppose, like with anything else, you've got to get a balance between how much it's your responsibility as well. Because you can't solve the world's problems, but at the same time, you want to do what you can, and still be able to live your life.
I guess it's just worth having that sort of idea of, don't just stand back at the sidelines because you're going to regret it. Because that,
for me, it boils down to how I feel about it, how I feel about myself, and that comes down to back to the self-esteem issue. Is, am I okay with ignoring this and walking away from it, or is that going to be detrimental to my personal self-esteem?
But you don't know, and you don't have a time machine, so you can't go back and stop it then.
No, but the more you live, I think the more experience you get, and at kind of judging.
That is one of the interesting things about that Life is Strange thing, because in that you do have a time travel power. Okay, spoiler alert.
That's how a series killers. series.
There is a girl that gets bullied into suicide, and there are multiple
If you make the wrong decisions.
Yeah. And there are multiple chances to reverse time and step in. There's a particular incident where there's the security chief having a go at her because he believes that she's done some dodgy stuff, and you can either intervene or you can take a photo for evidence. But a lot of people in that situation would do neither. They'd just walk past.
Yeah.
They'd just go, not my problem.
I think as well, that tends to be more the case in big cities, because you tend to keep yourself to yourself more out of self-preservation. Not always, but people in general will tend to walk on by more.
I guess that's sort of the
It's a more threatening environment
mentality, because you make up a smaller percentage of your environment, so you making yourself stand out by challenging this person makes you feel small, I guess, rather than part of the majority that don't do anything. But I think just generally...
Sometimes it just takes one person to start it, though. I mean, if there's enough people around and one person's being victimised...
As much as possible, we need to work to prevent violence where possible, before it even gets to a point where someone would want to do that. I watched a TED Talk relatively recently from someone who went into locker rooms around American colleges to see if it really was all locker talk, that grabbing pussy stuff.
Right.
And one of the things that they said when they were asked to think why they're told that fucking people's cool and why they need to do that, and there was just a really long pause, and the person wasn't trying to catch them out, and they just said, well, I've never actually been told to think for myself.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to be aware of all things in general, rather
That's
than
general
just
good
going,
life advice. That I think we've had that in a different subject. Just being aware.
Yeah, the environment. Probably social media. Did we do social media? Yeah, we did.
Open your eyes and
look up at the skies.
And see.
Let's stop quoting Bohemian Rhapsody, even though it's great.
I'm just a poor boy. I don't need no sympathy.
Yeah, I know. It's not really relevant anymore.
Easy come, easy go.
He's just going to be singing the entire song until it gets to...
I'm not singing. Anyway, the wind blows.
Bismillah.
No! Recommended link, because we haven't had one yet. Look it up on YouTube. A band called Bad News doing a cover of Bohemian Rhapsody. Thank you.
Okay.
Especially if you're a Young Ones fan back in the
You can
80s.
probably link to the MVP thing, Mentors for Violence Protection, because I think it's
Okay. I'll do that
program
too.
around.
Anyway, I'm going to need to wrap up because I've got shitloads of work to do. Still.
Yeah. Okay. That's and I think we've talked enough about this. It's just generally for you and for other people, be more aware of how your actions and inactions affect the people around you. But yeah, it's the world's weight isn't on your shoulders. Don't feel guilty for every single thing that goes wrong, because sometimes you can't help it. Sometimes you need other people to step up as well.
Yeah, and also
the
be aware
confidence to reach out to people that are more able to deal with the situation is a worthwhile.
Yeah. Also be aware of if you're potentially a victim and you might not know it. Have a think. There's help out there.
And even if it's difficult, try and keep away from those sorts of people that bring you down, because
if being with someone
power greedy.
If being with someone makes you feel bad, whatever you might think, you don't need to be around them, however they might make you feel.
Yeah.
There's always other options.
Anyway, I think that's all from us.
What is it? What's the Bill and Ted? What do Bill and Ted say? Be excellent to each other.
Cool. I've been Firebolt.
I've been the Orbiter.
And this has been Breaking Bollocks, episode 30. Violence.
Jinx. That was the worst comedy sound effect I think I've ever heard. So I'm being verbally violent to you now, aren't I?
Oh, it was a funny thing.
No, it wasn't.
No, in Rocky, they had to mute. Who's the actor? Is it Sylvester Stallone?
Yeah.
They had to mute his talking sometimes when he was doing the punching, because he'd do his own sound effects.
All right.
Just like.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Anyway.
Bye.
This podcast is part of the After Dark Podcast Network.